All right, welcome back to Blurry Creatures. We have an in-studio episode that's airing today, and one thing we do here is quarterly we have in-studio guests. A studio audience can come in, hang out with us, and right now you can get tickets to the next one, which is July 26th, 6 p.m.
Right here in Franklin, Tennessee. That's right. These are super fun, very intimate. There are limited tickets. You can join us. About 25 people can sit in here with us. We're going to interview our guests. We'll have dinner for our VIPs and refreshments for everyone here. Get a chance to take pictures, see the studio, touch the things. Maybe you want to play duck hunt. We can fire that up. But we have a lot of fun, and it's a chance to be here for a live recording of our episodes.
So check it out. Hit the website, blurrycreatures.com. Click the banner. Get some tickets. We'll see you in July.
Of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal, Timothy.
It's a big deal. How you guys doing?
Let's go!
Yeah. Welcome to Blurry Creatures Basement. This is our first live event, and you guys are here.
Guinea pigs.
Test drive this thing.
Thanks for being here.
You guys having fun? You guys came from all over the place. We got some people from far away here.
We ordered way too much food.
Yeah.
No one's leaving hungry. If you are, it's your fault. I'm taking a lot of Chick-fil-A home. Brad, you got it, man. Whatever you need, buddy. You are up for it. You can have whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you guys coming in. We're going to have a good time tonight. We got Derek Olson in the house. Give it up for Derek. We're going to be talking about all sorts of blurry stuff. He's got a blurry grab bag, and it's hard to pick what you want to talk about.
Yeah, he does, yeah. Yeah, he's a lot of things. Megalithic marvels to Stargate, Voyager.
Yeah.
Derek's been around since the beginning, as is Timothy Alvarino. Tim's hanging out tonight. Say hi. Everybody give it up for Timothy Alvarino. It's really fun. This is part of like sort of the inside when we start the show and we have folks, the acumen of like Derek Olson and Timothy Alvarino that join us and believed in our show from the beginning, and then those people become friends and almost like family. We do a lot with Tim. We were just in Costa Rica. We've done Peru. We have the Book of Enoch, and then Derek in the same way. He took a chance on two guys that started a show before we had a website. We were talking about this earlier, Brad. And they kind of just were like, "Hey, this is cool. We'll give you our 10,000 hours in our content." And we're sitting here doing this in front of you guys for the first time, which is a little surreal. And we obviously have BlurryCon, and we've done some events, so this is not like new hat. It's a little bit old hat, but it's like new in the sense that we've never done a studio thing like this. And to have our friends show up, Tim's in town. He decided to spend time with us, and Derek flew in to do the show. It's pretty special. So glad you guys could join us for this. Yeah.
Appreciate you guys. We'll try to get the podcast, the audio version live here. But where is Derek? We need to bring him in.
Bring him out.
Give it up for Derek Olson. Come on in here. Let's go. How you doing?
Awesome. I am so honored to be at the first live taping. Look at this place.
It took a long time on eBay. And actually Goodwill.com. It's unknown secret.
Behind the scenes story, since y'all are here. John, who is he owns the studio. John's back here in the other room. This is his. He is our partner in this project. He actually had to tell Nate at one time to stop buying things.
Yeah.
And stop bringing things in because we had way too much in this.
I still got a bunch of stuff.
Nate was trying to mule things in here. But John caught him. He said, no, that's new. That's got to go back in your truck. That's not staying here.
Your eBay addiction?
You got to yeah. Well, you know.
Well, he had this like
If you're gonna
lag
do
in
it, you
time
gotta do
where
it right.
things kept showing up at your house, and you're like, I got more stuff.
Yeah, he was like, no more stuff in the studio. I'm like, yeah, but I ordered stuff yesterday and the day before, and it hasn't shown up yet. So I've got to smuggle that in here somehow. But thanks for joining us in the Blurry Basement. We're kicking it off today. We're going to be talking about the Bennington Triangle, and
The Bennington.
Yeah, and I haven't heard of this myself. So.
Yeah. Before we jump in,
Yeah.
I've got a couple.
Thoughts on Bigfoot?
Well, you know, when you're
What are
in
your
the
thoughts on Bigfoot after all this time, Derek?
I answered that question before.
Yeah, he's done.
When you're in the presence of royalty, you got to bring gifts, right? So, couple gifts for you guys.
Oh, look at this. Did you find this in the parking lot?
I know it looks just like
What are
rocks, but I
You gave me the small one, of course, dude.
All right.
sorry they're not at the same size.
First shall be last.
This
I
could be
present
anything.
to you. These are actual pieces of ancient megalithic Egyptian pyramids
No way.
Wow.
that I gathered just for you
Is this
guys.
why you're not invited back to Egypt? This is probably it.
Well, if it's just a rock, you know, it's cool. So
That is cool. Thanks, man.
it was just a rock I found on the ground.
Hey,
Dude,
just
this
happened to be in
is-
the basement.
just happened to be in the basement, inside of it. Look at that.
Yeah, and then
It's gonna
I
stay
love it.
here.
There's some stories to tell on that.
It's back in the basement. Or are you talking about the basement of the pyramids? Or are you talking about this basement?
and then I got two other things for you. Is this?
It's not even my birthday.
I'm kind of like Nate. I have a fellow appreciation for vintage stuff. A little bit of a collector at times on eBay myself. So I brought you two things. They're small things.
Oh my!
But this is to go with the decor. We've got the Bosk bounty hunter
Oh, here we go.
from Star Wars.
Yes.
1970 something.
All right.
And then I think this guy's Destro G.I. Joe
Dude.
with tight joints. Okay, hard to find. So
Let's go.
He doesn't move well.
Yes.
Kind of like us these days.
Hey, that kind of looks like some of the guys we talk about on the show there.
Oh man.
and it's
thank you.
awesome that Tim's here, man. What a day to be here. So
No, I think that's, this means a lot to us because I think, like Luke said, we've developed friendships and there's this community aspect of the podcast. I don't think we ever thought that people were going to want to hang out and be friends. And I think that's something that's unexpected in the Blurryverse is just the community aspect of what's happening behind the scenes here. So thank you guys for, again, just being our friends and just bringing so much more life to this podcast and just some conversations, and then you tune out and you forget about it and you move on to the next podcast. But so many people want to get together, get in the room, hang out, and feel that energy. And obviously at our conferences, it's been awesome. So where do we kick off this conversation today, though? I'm trying to get in the podcast mode. It's I just want to sit here and talk about stuff you found in the pyramids.
That'd be a short conversation. There's just two little rocks here.
Yeah.
This one's white, that one's brown.
Hey.
the Bennington Triangle. So
Yeah.
it seems like most people I talk to haven't necessarily heard of this subject or this story, but it's something that kind of got on my radar. I went down the rabbit hole of study, and the more I learned, the more I was just taken back by the different legs to this story, the credible witnesses, the newspaper reports. So I'm like, man, this is episode worthy. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I hope it lives up to that. But we can jump in and talk about, to the average person, the state of Vermont. When you think of Vermont, you probably think of maple syrup, right? Autumn leaves, those colorful bridges. Yet there's this arcane secret that the locals know about, known as the Bennington Triangle. And it's where mysterious events, strange lights, creatures, sadly murders, and a string of major disappearances that took place in a span of 5 years all took place in this one little area, and it's really left the locals bewildered. So that's
The Bennington Triangle.
what we're going to jump into.
How do you narrow it down to a triangle? How did they know that in this certain area this stuff was happening?
Great question. Let's go to photo 2, Dan. And so the Bennington Triangle is situated in the southwest portion of Vermont. It's nestled in the foothills of what's called Glastonbury Mountain. And there's a bunch of ghost towns that used to be thriving back in the late 1800s. So it's the towns of Glastonbury, Somerset, and Bennington. They basically make up the triangle, which we're seeing here on the map. And that's where all of these strange anomalies and anomalous events have happened. And the crazy thing is, back in the late 1700s, the logging and the mining industries were booming. And so I think there was 250 people that lived in this little town of Glastonbury in 1880. So it was blowing up. It was the place to be. It was mining. It was timber. Today it sits virtually abandoned. And in fact, in the 2020 census, I believe, there's only 9 people living there. So it's totally vanished. So the big question is, what happened to Glastonbury and these other ghost towns? To really answer this, we got to go way back to the 1800s.
Oh. I like this is domestic. I mean, because we talked that Alaska is actually part of the U.S. as well. So we talked about the Alaskan Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, but this one is, it's continental United States. Very Vermonty. Like Bernie Sanders was around for the founding of Glastonbury, so he could probably tell us a bit, but we won't get into that.
He was taken for a few years and dropped off.
Oh, he's old enough to have been around. He knows.
Maybe that's why it became a ghost town,
joke
Derek.
to you. I know.
Maybe those creatures were showing up and people were getting out of there.
They were just heading out.
In a world of blurry things and mysterious things, one thing that shouldn't be a mystery is your kid's health. And that's why we're excited to introduce Beam Kids All-in-One Super Powder.
And it is a super powder, Nate. Beam Kids is packed with over 40 essential nutrients, including grains, fruits, vitamins, pre and probiotics, literally everything kids need for healthy growth, strong immune systems, and steady energy throughout the day. It's pediatrician formulated, third-party tested, and co-created by Olympic gold medalist and mom and friend of Blurry Creatures, Sean Johnson.
I love it. And we're parents here at Blurry Creatures. We've got little guys running around, and Luke's got a little girl, and they need all the help they can get these days with all the crazy stuff and all the conspiracy theories. You guys, the rabbit holes are going down. You know it, and you're not unaware of that. And now Beam Kids has launched even new flavors to get your kids healthy. Chocolate chip cookie flavor that tastes like dessert and works like a multivitamin. So many picky eaters ask for seconds of greens, and let's let that sink in.
Yeah, and my son loves this. I mean, he asked for his quote chocolate milk, which is our Beam Kids every morning. It's really helped get those vegetables down when he won't take them the normal way. Every morning, chocolate milk for Jack, and it's really exceeded expectations. With all the good things in it, I thought maybe Jack wouldn't like it, but he asked for it every single morning.
And now's the perfect time to try. Beam is offering an exclusive deal to listeners. For limited time, you can get up to 35% off 2 free gifts when you go to shopbeam.com/blurry. Use code blurry at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/blurry. Use code blurry for up to 35% off and 2 free gifts.
And so let's jump to photo 3. And so going back to the mid-1800s, there's reports, like I said, of mysterious lights, strangeness in the area. And it's interesting, the Native Americans of the region refuse to set foot on Glastonbury Mountain unless they're burying their dead. And legend has it, going back to the 1800s, that the forests were home to what's known as the Glastonbury Monster. And we've got this beautiful vintage photo of the Glastonbury Monster we captured. No, not really. Yeah. But this was a hairy man-like, almost Bigfoot-esque creature who cryptozoologists believe was one of the earlier sightings of Bigfoot in the 1800s. And so you've got this sighting of this beast that took place in the early 19th century. And here's the famous story of the Glastonbury Monster. There's this group traveling into Glastonbury in their stagecoach. So picture the good old Western days. And they're on their way to Glastonbury, and the road's washed out. And as they're preparing to turn the horses and the stagecoach around, they begin to hear some noises coming from the forest. And some reports say they heard this ghastly roar. And suddenly this creature emerges and literally attacks the stagecoach, knocks it over. And it doesn't hurt anybody, but people are in shock, and this thing disappears into the darkness.
Man.
What do you think of that?
I mean, I like those old ones, those old Western. stories of Bigfoot and the creatures of
Wild West.
Yeah, it's like the videos are in like 4x speed, and there's like some good piano music in the background going real fast.
Black
He
and white.
knocks over the stagecoach and he's out of it. It sounds like a Bigfoot encounter, though. I mean,
silent film. Silent film. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. But it does sound like a Bigfoot encounter.
Yeah.
I mean, in the sense of there's enough stories that come through that talk about Bigfoot coming up to trailers and shaking campers, and I mean, obviously stories are told so no one dies, but there's this terrifying experience. Okay,
Reminds me of that meme that goes around where like pioneer women churning butter didn't have a Bigfoot podcast to listen to. You know, that one that went viral.
Yeah.
But they did. They just told stories to each other while they were churning the butter about Bigfoot knocking over the stagecoach.
The Amish still do it.
Yeah.
No podcast there.
So the story is old. Bigfoot legends are old. They're not
old.
new.
And so that's the first kind of weird, crazy documented report we have in this area known as the Bennington Triangle. 1879, there's a report of 2 hunters who had this encounter with a strange creature in the mountains, and it appeared to look like a man with wild eyes. And so people wonder, was this another encounter with the Glastonbury beast? And then in the year 1867, this is another bizarre report from the 1800s in this region, where people all over were encountering what was known as the Glastonbury wild man. Now, this was a little different than the Glastonbury monster in that this wild man lived in a cave, and he would come into these small towns, and he would pull back this long trench coat he was wearing and expose himself. If you know what I'm saying. And so
there's not a lot of mystery there, Derek. Yeah.
This caused a lot of especially with the females of the town's nervousness and fear. Jump to 1892.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a Sasquatch sighting and a wild man sighting. Big difference.
It's a flasher. Yeah, you're like, dude, this is
the wild man.
Hopefully he was very hairy and it didn't scare anybody. You know, keep going.
Right?
So
1892, 1892 marks the first murder in this Bennington Triangle. And there was a sawmill worker named John Crowley. He gets bludgeoned to death by a fellow mill worker, Henry McDowell. And McDowell said he did it because he heard voices telling him to do it. And so this guy was sent to an insane asylum, the murderer. He ends up escaping and was never seen again. And so this just kind of brought more fear and uncertainty to those living in these towns. Where is this murderer? What happened to him? And is he roaming the forests? Okay, jump to 1897. And 5 years after McDowell's escape, there's another murder. And this is a prominent Woodford citizen named John Harbor, 40-year-old guy. He's going out with to hunt, and he's wanting to shoot a big buck, I'm sure. And he's going out to a part of the Bennington Triangle known as Bickford Hollow, which would also become known as Hell Hollow, as you'll find out. And so the town and communities are shocked when they find Harbor, who went to shoot, and an animal is shot dead himself. His body is later discovered several yards from where the shooting took place. He was left beneath a tree where he slowly bled out, and his fully loaded rifles there found beside him. And so this just shocks the community and brings even more uncertainty. And so you can jump to photo 4 now. And so the murders of Crowley and Harbor would quicken the area's decline. The timber industries begin to wane. People start whispering that this area is cursed, and people just start to move away. They start to find jobs elsewhere. And so Glastonbury and its neighboring settlements shrink into these ruinous ghost towns, and then they were actually unincorporated from, the city. They got so small. So that's kind of sets the backdrop for this area. And then we move into the Big Five Disappearances. Are you guys ready for this?
Yeah.
Got any questions?
No, I think that. Are you insinuating that this area is also an Indian burial ground. Is that what I meant to understand about the Native American lore around this?
Yeah, there's so many pieces to this that we're going to get into, but yes, the Native Americans of the area, like I said, they will not touch the mountain, apparently, unless they're burying somebody. And they have a very fascinating legend of something that might have to do with these disappearances.
All right. I'm getting ahead of ourselves. All right. That's good.
Look at that.
I like it.
Teased it.
You ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So before we get into the Big Five disappearances, we have what I call the prequel to the Big Five. November 11th, 1943. And actually, I think David Paulides mentions this account in one of his books, Missing 411. 37-year-old Carl Herrick, this guy goes hunting, so we got another hunting incident. He's hunting in the woods of Glastonbury. And at some point during the hunt, he and his cousin, Henry, get separated. Henry eventually makes it back to camp, but Carl never shows up. And so at dusk, they begin to look for Carl, and they're not finding him. He hasn't arrived. And so they start searching for him day after day, and I guess for 3 days. No trace of Carl. On dusk, on the third day, Henry stumbles upon Carl's body, and he was laying in the woods. And this is strange. He was motionless. He had his loaded rifle leaning against a tree 70 feet away. And the official post-mortem was baffling. It reported that Carl had been squeezed to death, and his lung was found to be punctured by his own ribs. So this was the first weird, I should say this was the first really weird murder that happened in modern times.
Squeezed.
What squeezes someone to death, but he was never like bloodied that we know of.
So not like a creature squeezed him. Maybe.
Was it the same as being like crushed to death, or is that different? Squeeze is pretty specific.
Squeezed to where his lung was punctured by his, ribs pushing so hard against it.
That's the thing about the missing 411 stuff that's so strange, is that just when you think you kind of figure it out, you don't. And I think early on, Bigfoot was kind of the answer to all those questions when you got into, oh yeah, there's this rogue creature doing all these things. But then the evidence doesn't really work for very long. And that with that theory, there's something maybe UFO related, abduction related, and the way people are kind of missing and then put back in strange ways. My guess would be he was taken maybe and then messed with and then put back. But it kind of sounds like that. But I don't know.
So we've got some creatures, some wild men, some murders.
There's a flasher loose out there.
And now we've got the disappearances.
Yeah.
The Big Five, I call them. So the first one, photo 5, is Mitty Rivers. And so more than, again, 4 decades would pass since the activity in the 1800s till we had that last murder, and then we had these disappearances. So it starts on November 12th, 1945. A 74-year-old man, Mitty Rivers, he's going hunting with his son Joseph and some friends near Bickford Hollow, also known as Hell Hollow. And it's like 7:30 a.m. that day. They leave camp to start the hunt, and they're hiking together. They reach this fork in the trail. Being an avid hunter who knows the area well, Mitty's like, you guys go that way, I'll go this way. He probably just wanted the best chance to shoot something by himself, And he goes off and he says, I'll meet you back at lunch in camp. Well, he never shows up. And so his son starts to worry about him. They start to call out for him, look for him. There's no Mitty anywhere. And so they get worried enough, they alert the authorities, and they scour the forest for hours and then days. Still no trace of Mitty. Eventually the search is called off as winter sets in. And then months later, a hiker finds a blue handkerchief with 30 cents wrapped inside that belonged to Mitty. But Mitty was never found. Again, the weird thing is Mitty was a native of the area, knew the area well, experienced outdoorsman. He had matches and a gun. When he left the others, he would have known you had thought to fire his rifle if he was lost or start a fire, but he was never found. So that's our first big disappearance in 1945.
That's very missing 411. I mean,
yeah, it reminds me of that story in the Hunted, his documentary when the gun was just lying and they only found the guy's backpack, but it was kind of a distance from where it was reported.
Yeah, very capable outdoorsmen that are so familiar with the terrain and locations and yet no trace is always super. I mean, it's really fascinating. I think that we were just having a conversation about this last week with Mike Ricksecker. We had an interview that hasn't been released yet. And Mike was on for the Alaskan Triangle, so I promise there's relevance to this, but Mike he'd written his most recent book is on stargates, and so he started talking about portals and stargates and what they call X points now, which is really just what they think is a naturally occurring portal. It's a really interesting idea that like a lot of the orbs that people see, there's contention, at least Mike contends, that the orbs themselves could be what you see and visualize as the end of a portal. It's actually it looks as like a ball of light. It's actually the end of, or the opening of a portal, although it appears as an orb.
Yeah.
And it kind of starts to make things that make a little bit of sense. Like when you think about some of the things people talk about with Bigfoot and orbs, for an example, or orbs and UFOs. And then you get into the politest things, and there's so many stories, Derek, about folks just walking off, and then there's nothing. I always go to the one that haunts me the most is the man on Shasta, since that was so close to where I grew up. And those footprints just stop.
Yeah,
and John Dover talked about this too, about tracking things. The footprints would just stop.
Yeah,
there's a Bigfoot or even tracking a human, and then they're just gone. And where'd they go? It's like you can step into these places on Earth where there's the right amount of energy or electromagnetivity or whatever it causes that you have these sort of natural openings, and then.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, do you think it's natural, or do you think there's something more nefarious going on, or some sort of ancient defilement of the area? Like, speaking of triangles,
it's a lot of options now.
All of the above.
That's the triangle.
No, yes, and
yeah. If you know me, you
talked about
think
this earlier out there.
I sat on the nefarious, and I think I'll hopefully almost prove that by the time we get to the end.
Okay.
There's something that seems to be strangely paranormal happening here.
That's how I like it. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
So
going. That was our first big disappearance. Poor old Mitty Rivers.
Oh, Mitty.
May he rest his soul. And then we have number 2, Paula Weldon. This was probably the biggest disappearance. This was world news, I believe. Photo 6, please. So the following year, and these always happen in the late fall, early winter, 1946, Paula Weldon, sweet young college student. She's attending Bennington College. She's a sophomore. And on Sunday, December 1st, she's finishing her shift at the dining hall, returns to her dorm, and she tells her roommate that she needs a break from her studies. She's feeling tired, and she just wants to go on a hike, get some fresh air. And with another account we're going to hear, it's almost like the mountain was calling to them in a weird way when you kind of look into some of the stuff they said. So she leaves campus wearing a red sweater, jeans and sneakers. She hitchhikes a ride from a nice guy named Lewis Knapp, who lives near Glastonbury Mountain. He said, I'll give you a ride till my house, and then you can just walk the rest of the way. And so he drives her to the house. She appeared to be in a good mood, drops her off, and she was excited to go on the hike. She thanked him and continued toward her destination about 3 miles away. And witnesses saw her approaching the trailhead. And about 4 p.m., Paula makes it to the mountain. She talks to a group of hikers near Bickford Hollow, known as Hell Hollow, asking for directions. And they were like, hey, you're actually on the trail. Just start going that way. And Paula begins her hike, and she's never seen again. She's reported missing the next day. and her disappearance again becomes major news. They had the authorities mobilize this massive search and rescue mission. Helicopters, bloodhounds, National Guard, never found a trace of Paula Wilt. Oh,
yeah, those are the perplexing ones. When there's no evidence, sometimes there's just a few things, like a shoe. So they didn't find anything.
Yeah, and again, it's always interesting that most of these people are going to this area known as Bickford Hollow that's in the Bennington Triangle, which they've also nicknamed Hell Hollow because of all of these disappearances. So this next one is wild. So that was number 2. Number 3 disappearance of the Big Five, photo 7. We've got a guy named James E. Tedford. This guy's a military vet. And exactly 3 years to the day after the disappearance of Paula, December 1st, 1949, 68-year-old military vet James E. Tedford, this guy's riding on a bus, and he's coming from the town of St. Albans back to Bennington. And the bus drives along Route US 7 that'll take him straight to the heart of the Bennington Triangle. The bus makes several stops, and it finally gets to James's stop. But the problem is, when the bus, everybody gets off the bus except James. His suitcase was left on his seat, and something else he had, a bus schedule, but it's like he vanished into thin air. He never got off the bus. And he was last seen wearing his good old army overcoat. No one goes searching for him immediately because, you know, he kind of lives by himself, I believe. A search party is eventually launched, but again, never any trace of James E. Tedford. What do you think of that one?
I like that he was visiting his wife in Franklin. So at 68, he's like, man, we'll still be married. I can't live together. I'm going to come visit you via bus. And then he's gone.
Maybe the
Very
bus
interesting situation, Derek.
Maybe the bus went through the portal.
Yeah.
That's weird, man.
Well, right at his stop.
These are the kind of stories that you kind of have to expand your paradigm. You have to kind of open up more options. It's not like something came on and something
Is there any
unseen has happened.
Is there any follow-up to this?
Yeah.
Like, did they ever find anything but what's left? Does he... No remains. They're just like he just vanishes off.
There was one report that there's some reports that say some people thought they saw him get off at the stop before his to talk to a friend that was standing outside, but that he did get back on the bus. So some wonder maybe he actually didn't get back on the bus, but the point is he still disappeared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about this a lot. We did this episode about these two guys in class in junior high that, you know, they just walk into class one day and they walk out of the classroom and it's like nobody's there in school. And it's like second period, they've been in school all day long and all of a sudden everyone's gone. So if that story is true or if parts of that story is true, it's like, you know, these portals, openings or disappearance can happen. It seems like they can happen. And I wonder if they're just walking along and then they're just not here anymore and they have no idea. They have no idea it even happened. But where do they go? Why do they come back sometimes? Anyway, in the modern era, it can happen in a building. So that's what I'm trying to say. It could happen just...
It's weird.
Or
it's
on
really
buses.
Weird. I mean,
so that was number 3. And then the 4th disappearance of the Big Five. You can go to the next photo, Dan. This is Paul Jepson. And so October 12th, 1950. So this is 5 years after the first one almost. There's a gal named Margaret Jepson. She's driving her truck to the Bennington County dump where she's like the caretaker for the property's many hogs. And she brings along her 8-year-old son, Paul. This one hits me deep because I got a 9-year-old daughter, you know, kind of close. And they arrive about 3 p.m. and she tells Paul, wait in the truck while I go and finish the chores with the good old pigs. And But when she returns to the truck 30 minutes later, Paul's gone. She obviously calls the police. Bloodhounds track Paul's scent from the town dump to a fork in the road not far away, but Paul's scent vanishes into thin air and never seen again. Now, Paul's father stated something I thought was interesting in a report, that his son had previously expressed the urge to go into the mountains. Might kind of seem like a strange thing for an 8-year-old to say, I don't know. But Paul, just like Paula Weldon, was wearing a red coat. So, is there a tie there?
Like the British? I have no idea. I mean,
Yeah. Michael Jackson? We don't know.
that
is weird.
It's
I mean,
weird, yeah.
There's something
bandana.
about the clothing with the missing 411. You know, oftentimes the clothes are folded or almost like thrown out of. I guess if UFOs just tossing the laundry out the window as it's taken off.
So that's your hypothesis? It's a UFO? That's what you think's going on?
Maybe. I mean,
that was kind of arbitrary. Like, it's just tossing
yeah.
things out.
Well,
or maybe red.
Case closed.
Maybe
Nate
red.
solved it, guys. It was a UFO. Nate's case is closed.
No, I just think that it's a phenomena that seems beyond our understanding. Like, it's beyond just a human on human crime or an animal or a cryptid on human activity. It just, if you study these stories, you listen to enough of the missing 411 stuff, you just kind of have to like, and I think that's why, you know, even Politis will not really give you an answer, because the more you look into the data and all the points, there's no easy answer to any of it.
Right.
It's just strange. And maybe one case you can kind of go, oh, it's leaning towards this, but there's really no, because I remember when we interviewed him, we were trying to get him to say something, and he just would not give his opinion about these things. He was really, really cut and dry, really serious, and just didn't want to say what he thinks it is.
Oh, he just points back to the data. This is what the data says, and this is what.
But I can see why he takes that position, you know,
right?
Because once you start to form a theory, you just become kind of a lousy researcher.
Well, 100%. You've got to work backwards then to sort of or omit things in order to keep your theory propped up, right? So
yeah.
I think. So what happens? Is there any follow up, Derek, with this? Because my brain says that if an 8-year-old goes to a fork in a road, he probably gets picked up, right? I mean, we've all sat through all of the horrible abduction stuff with kids getting abducted, like not alien abduction, but just predator abduction. But I mean, nothing ever comes of that.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything after that? It's just another sort of mystery.
Yeah, that one's just a mystery. But this last of the Big Five Disappearances that we'll get into now has a little surprise at the end.
Oh.
Okay, so
Wild Man comes back.
Another guy in a trench coat.
Yeah.
Man.
There he is.
So this is an actual photo of some of the search parties. I don't know which disappearance this was, but these guys are just perplexed. And
it's like Leave It to Beaver, man.
They're like, what is going on?
Andy Griffith.
Yeah, that's a great show, by the way.
There we go.
So this last disappearance took place October 28th, 1950. So we had two in 1950, yeah.
All right.
So this was the Frida Langer case. And she's enjoying a wonderful camping trip with her family on the eastern side of Glastonbury Mountain. She's with her husband and her cousin Herbert. And that afternoon, Frida and Herbert decided, let's go on a hike, get some fresh air, get some exercise. Apparently her husband stays back because he was having some knee issue. And so Frida and Herbert, they leave camp about 3 p.m. About 3:45, as they're hiking, Frida slips and falls into the stream. But she's okay. But she's soaking wet, probably cold. And she tells cousin Herbert, hey, I'm going to run back to camp, get some dry set of clothing, and warm up, and then I'll come back up here and meet up with you. However, when Frida doesn't return back to Herbert, Herbert's assuming she just must have stayed back at camp with Max. So when Herbert ends his hike and gets back to camp, about an hour later, 4:45, he realizes Frida's not there. And he asks Max, where's Frida? He goes, I thought she was with you. And so these guys immediately start panicking, start searching. Authorities are called, as the stories always go. Massive search parties launched to find Frida. And this was October 28th. The search continues all through the month of November as winter's setting in. Frida's never found. What's odd is the Langer family actually owned this camp. And they would go there every summer or every year for a family camping trip. So they knew this place well. And actually, they were there every weekend, supposedly. So how did she become so lost in an hour's time in a place that should have been so familiar, right? So the search is called off because it's now winter. Everybody fears the worst. Now, here's the surprise, in a sense, which sets Frida's case apart from the rest. Less than a year later, May 12th, 1951, 2 fishermen find Frida's body near the dam at the Somerset Reservoir in the Bennington Triangle. This is about 4 miles from where she was last seen with Herbert. And what's interesting is it turns out 18 months before she disappeared, she had an operation to remove a brain tumor, which was causing her to occasionally black out. So some theorize maybe this is what happened again. On her way back to the stream, did she black out, fall in, and have an accidental drowning? But what's strange is the search parties had extensively scoured that area the year prior. And so to end this portion about the Big Five disappearances, we have this quote from the state attorney of Vermont in 1950. His name was Edward A. John. And he's on record. He said, quote, 5 persons in 5 years mysteriously missing, not knowing whether they are dead or alive, is not a record for the state, county, or any town to be proud of. Everyone is watching to see what Vermont will do. If this isn't solved, it will be a disgrace. So quite a statement from a government official.
That's hard. I mean, obviously in the ages before you were able to kind of piece together all these pieces and all these stories. And I really think, I'll just say there was a specific story, Dennis Martin, this kid that went missing in Smoky Mountains. And David Politis talked about that. I think I heard that story on Coast to Coast. And early in the Bigfoot days, long before Blurry Creatures was a thing, there was like when I heard that story, it changed how I thought about all the paranormal stuff. It wasn't just like fun anymore. It wasn't like interesting, like, oh, watch this Bigfoot documentary or whatever. It kind of was like, oh, this is kind of tragic. These people go missing, and then everyone involved is skeptical about what could have caused it or how it happened. I think a big part of what we do here at the show, on the show, is give people permission to believe this stuff and say it could be anything. Could be a UFO, could be aliens, could be Bigfoot, could be some sort of unsolved crime,
a serial killer or something.
Yeah. But people will not. They kind of cut off the list of what it could be at a certain point. And when I heard that guy's story, it was just his dad kind of crying about his son. It just changed in my mind, like, oh, this is worth talking about with people, because this stuff, people do go missing. People are just vanishing. And that, I think, led down some of the theological roads, how this could all be connected. And so it's not just a fun thing to talk about around the bonfire. We're actually kind of raising awareness. Like, hey, if you go out there, be aware. Don't just let your kids wander off in the woods by themselves.
Yeah, it sounds like don't be alone. That's probably like rule number 1.
Right.
Don't be a German physicist by yourself. Rule number 2.
But it's
don't go elk hunting.
So
rule number 3.
Is that when they coined the triangle? Like that was when they started saying it's here. It's
actually there was a guy that wrote a book in the 90s. Who kind of coined the phrase the Bennington Triangle. He wrote a book that hit on some of these topics. But again, the strangest of the area way predated that coined phrase. So there's been all this speculation regarding these mysterious events. Of these 5 most famous disappearances, all 5 disappeared within a 6-mile radius of each other. All 5 went missing in late fall, early winter. Most disappeared between 3 and 4 p.m.,
Wow.
And
That's weird.
4 of the 5 vanished into thin air. Now, as stated earlier, going back to the 1800s, there's reports of mysterious lights around Bennington. I found an account of one of the most recent ones, probably that happened in 1984, when numerous witnesses claimed seeing silo-like lights jetting above the sky as they were hiking through Glastonbury Mountain. And then another report I came across, really strange, of a farmer, and I believe this was in the 80s or 90s, who lived near Glastonbury Mountain. He arrives to find 23 of his 25 cows dead in the barn. The dead ones were arranged in a circle, and the 2 live ones were perfectly fine, like nothing happened. And a veterinarian determined that the dead cows died of electrocution. Yet the barn appeared fine. So that was a strange event. And then as I was brushing up on this in prep for this episode, I learned something brand new just the other day. Photo 10, please.
Let's go. We got people taking notes up here too, Derek. So they're ready.
Look at this. Oh. So, okay, this is weird.
I love it.
So this little town of Bennington is basically a ghost town, okay? Why in the world does this little town that has like 10 people living in it have one of the biggest obelisks in America erected in the center of town? This is a 300+ foot obelisk. It was erected in 1889.
There's a joke in there, Luke.
It's a phallus. You said erected. I mean,
yeah.
I'm still all perpetually.
This
12
goes
years
back
old.
to the wild man sighting.
It actually is a phallus. We'll get into that.
It's a family show.
Sorry.
It's a family
I
show.
said obelisk.
We got to remind people here listening at home that there's a crowd here. You know, we got to make some bad jokes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
that
Derek.
is strange though.
Great choice of words.
And
there,
you've
pal.
seen the real
Yeah.
ones in Egypt, so you tell us.
Yeah. Well, the Washington Monument in D.C. is about 600, I believe, feet high. So this is ginormous if you look at the scale there.
Yeah.
It was sorry. It was put up in 1889.
Can't look at you.
Me or him?
Either of you guys.
What's happening? I need to bring Macho Man back out here. Take care of you.
Where's Alberino? There he is.
Yeah.
All right.
What does he have to do with this?
I can look at Tim. I can't really see Tim, but
this is a weird triangle you're putting together.
Just feels like the memes that we send each other on
exactly.
Instagram. Yeah.
Early on in the show, if the show is getting a little bored, Luke would text me interesting things mid-show while I'm asking questions. Keep going, Derek.
This is a fun.
Is this one of those moments?
Like, because we used to do this all on Zoom. I was talking to some of you guys out here about how it is to transition to the studio, and like, I don't do this. I wouldn't do this in the studio anymore. But I used to try to like snipe Nate sometimes, like because we were sitting on our computers doing interviews, and so I would try to like text him something to break him as he's trying to answer a question.
Yeah, I'm trying to be all
because it was fun, you know. And it's kind of like, you know,
make this a job, you know.
Yeah, I know. Like, we're gonna be serious about this now, but at one point, yeah, we're still not that serious. But yeah, so I'd send him things to try to get him to break on camera because I knew what was happening in the background. But now we just do it live.
You would
it's
just
very awkward.
You would just slowly develop a Grinch smile if, like, Dr. Laura said some innuendo. You'd
that
be
is
like,
such a that is.
And I'm like, dude,
that's a Q&A question. We can cover
serious.
that one when it's not on the. No, okay.
Back to the phallus.
Okay, back to the
What
back to
is
the
the
obelisk
deal
that was erected in the middle of.
What are we talking about?
So I want to ask a serious question.
We want to get back on the rails.
Stop! I promise. It's serious.
Okay.
Why is there not long pause? Why is there an obelisk there? I mean, is there any kind of history behind this?
Yes.
Okay.
I knew you were going to get to that. I want to help you here.
So it was put up in the year 1889. So, I mean, this is part of the history here. Come on.
I know you've got a thread. We're pulling a thread here. I know where we're going.
Placed in 1889 to commemorate, I think it was called the Battle of Bennington, Revolutionary War battle that took place in 1777. So they put up this giant obelisk. Now, having been to Egypt, right, there's some deep esoteric and occult significance to obelisks that again, their origins go back to Egypt. They were usually dedicated to the sun god Ra. There's some ancient Egyptian legends that state these were basically energy antennas placed at power centers to regulate and amplify Earth energies. Okay, so that's playing into this portal stuff. The tapering shape and the pointed tip directed spiritual energy, supposedly, according to the ancient Egyptians, signifying enlightenment and divine connection. And I think this is why we see them in DC, in Rome, London, all have obelisks, right? They're strategically placed. And the Freemasons, as you know, adopted the obelisk as their symbol of hidden wisdom and this initiation. It's associated with sacred geometry, and basically they function as sundials. And so again, in deeper occult traditions, here's where it gets crazy. They may symbolize the ability to transcend linear time and access hidden knowledge. And even in contemporary occultism today, obelisks, they're really seen as a focal point of spiritual power, often used in ceremonial magic and even astral projection.
Yeah, I mean, this is the story of DC, right? We've talked about the idea that it's Osiris and Isis, right? In DC, if you've everyone watched the film by the Fall brothers that talk about the belly of the beast, right? They actually talk extensively about the idea that the Washington Monument sits down from the the Senate or the
Lincoln,
the Capitol building, which is supposed to be the womb of Osiris or the womb of Isis, and the obelisk of Osiris. And there's this apparently or allegedly that during each inauguration of a president, the Freemasons do a ceremony called the raising of Osiris, which is the Egyptian legend. Then is that Isis puts Osiris back together after he's passed away, and he's resurrected. And part of the parts that she makes is that part.
Yeah, I mean, DC has a ton of that, but this is like in the...
Right, so
where this is located is really strange.
You know what I'm saying? How close to Hell Hollow are we talking? Are we...
Right, well, this is in Bennington. So
Right.
this is smack dab inside the Bennington Triangle. I don't know exactly how close it is to the Hell Hollow, Bickford Hollow spot.
Yeah.
But the fact, like you said, that this gigantic obelisk is in this middle of nowhere, basically.
Yeah.
This isn't DC. This isn't even Chicago, right?
Yeah.
This is this little town. I think it's playing a piece, but I think it connects to something else. Let's go to photo 11, and we'll wrap up this topic here. So this photo doesn't do it justice because there's even more that are bigger and more complete. Unbeknownst to most, these large, mysterious artificial stone mounds known as cairns, that's kind of the name they've been dubbed with. They're located on the top of Glastonbury Mountain, okay, which is a pretty decent-sized mountain. Mainstream will say these are colonial. I do not believe that at all. These are pre-colonial. I believe these are pre-Native American. These are prehistoric, and they're on top of the mountain. Approximately 20 years ago, there was an archaeologist, David Lacey, who worked with the Forest Service, checking the status of the fire towers, and he discovered these. 3 of them on top of Glastonbury Mountain. And they're right off the legendary Long Trail, Bickford Hollow. And in his report, he even states, and it would take too much time to go into it, but he says these are very old with the moss coverage that's on them. These things, he believes, are prehistoric. And they predate the colonial days. And so I believe it's likely these cairns predate everything else. And if you look into the cairns, and these can be found over the New England states, many researchers believe they had ancient ritualistic purposes. And here they are at the top of the mountain. Now, back to the Native American legends. Let's go to our last photo. The Native Americans have this legend of an enchanted stone among the cairns. I don't know if it's among the cairns or if it is a cairn, but they have a legend of a man-eating stone that could swallow a man whole, and they would never be heard from again. and this is in the lore of the Native Americans. And it's called the man-eating stone. And there's even some stories of, the guys that have the equipment that are measuring stuff. I can't think of the term. Surveyors on the mountain disappearing, and some believing that they were eaten alive by the man-eating stone. So are we talking cross-dimensional wormhole type stuff here? So my big questions, did these cairns play a part, along with this obelisk that came later, in possibly activating this area in some strange paranormal way that links to these strange anomalies that we've covered? Is there a connection between the cairns in the mountains and these bizarre events? Now, last piece of news. And I just found this a couple of weeks ago. This is like the icing on the cake. As recently as 2008, the Bennington Banner, the newspaper of the area, published an article that was called Lost in Glastonbury. And it documented an experience from the 2000s of a guy named Robert Singley, who was the Bennington College music teacher. Okay, so an academic. And this guy loved to hike. And one day he goes out to Bickford Hollow, the exact same place Paula Weldon was lost. And he's just going for a good, maybe it was an hour or two hike. And he states that right before he lost the trail, everything crescendoed into a weird sort of dizzying confusion. He said, it just suddenly got dark, and then I was like, where am I? What's going on? I was totally lost. And so this guy gets lost in 2007 or 8, and he was wet and cold. He takes shelter under a large maple tree. And the next morning, he attempts to find his way back and stated that he thought he had camped about a quarter mile from the car, but instead he woke up on the other end of a ridge, which was 6 or 7 miles away from where he thought he was. He said it didn't make any logical sense at all. He's eventually found by the Vermont State Police. But I thought that was, again, this is an academic who works at Bennington College, who got lost and said these things that were very strange, right? So my $1 million question to you guys is the Bennington Triangle just a series of coincidences? Or do you think there's something strangely sinister happening in Vermont?
Do you think some of those like obelisks and some of these cairns were like weather, related to weather, or controlling the weather at all? So that's another theory too. And like if there's already energy there, then they would be building things to try to harness that.
I think there could be connection with weather. But again, the focal point of all these anomalies is, disappearances.
Well, that would just be to me like thinking that there's energy there, right? I mean, if you think about the missing 411 phenomena, I mean, Yosemite's the top of how many people go missing, but there's all that rock there, all the granite rocks and boulders, and you wonder if somehow the energy is moving through that and just opening doorways, and people are mistakenly like this academic just on a walk round the bend, walking right through just this phenomena that just might even be a split second. It just opens up, they go through. It could be 6 miles away or somewhere else entirely. I mean, it gets as weird as it can on our show. People saying Bigfoot's crawling through portals and you can see somewhere else, or it could just be like a little wormhole from one end to the other.
What's that period of time? What years between those 5 disappearances? Is it 45 to 50? Is that right?
Exactly.
Nothing since? Like it's on par with that, or other than this most recent?
Well, you wonder if they're keeping track.
No, I'm just thinking about what's happening between 1945 and 1950.
There may have been more recent, not that I'm aware of, though.
What happened what's happened during 1945, 1950? Manhattan Project is what I'm starting thinking about, right? So we have the development and deployment of the atomic bomb. that is a major disruptor to things like Earth energies, magnetic forces, and electromagnetic forces in the Earth.
UFOs.
Also the appearance of UFOs, as we know, it's because really the Foo Fighters' appearance during World War II was a big deal. All of a sudden, with the advent of the bomb, there's reports of these craft showing up on the wings and around some of our fighter jets, and it seems like there can't be nothing's coincidental. So I wonder if you amplify that by testing, because this is Vermont is not, of course, not New Mexico, and it's not Hiroshima, it's not Japan. But I think that the connectedness of the electromagnetic aspects of the Earth and things that are going on there, maybe what you have, and this is very much a working theory, but maybe what you have is a place that already was identified as an energy place, right? We know the ancients did this, right? I mean, the ideas of the ancient megaliths, and this is your expertise, were all strategically placed where they were on the Earth. That was for energy purposes. They were on almost on a circle. They were on a latitude. There was purposefulness based in a lot of people talk about the pyramids. We've done this a bunch on the show. You do this in Egypt, but what are the purpose of the pyramids? Obviously, if you're sitting in the room or you're sitting here with us, it's like most likely you reject the Egyptologist explanation. These are tombs, right? So what were they doing? And people talk about power plants. We've had folks on talking about chemical plants, et cetera. That wasn't multi-purpose. The idea is there's a different purpose for this, right?
At least many purposes.
So if we're talking about perhaps megalithic structures on this mountain, that means that there was identification, perhaps of significance would be that there'd be some sort of energy or there. That's I think a good hypothesis for a lot of the placement of the megalithic structures. And we talked about you, talked about Tim about this, that they're intentional in what they were doing in the placement. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that you have this 5-year period where this happens. And so I think you can do a lot of things there. You can talk about, the idea they just disappeared, like this missing 411, and we have this energy event. We have the Manhattan Project happening here. We have the deployment of the nuclear bomb. So we have these energy disruptions maybe that does that. I think if you're conventionally speaking, maybe you can't rule out that there's not some predator there. You think about things like the Zodiac killer and these other serial killers that operate for a certain amount of time and then they're gone. Do they go to jail? Do they die? Do they just stop? But typically those things don't remain hidden for 75 years, right? Like at least something comes out, right? Some family member finds trophies or something, right? There's some sort of evidence. It doesn't. Not always the case, but it is.
All these people are being called to the mountains as well.
Yeah, I think the Native American thing is hard to ignore. Like
What about more strange lights in the area? You had one story, but just to cap it off, is there any more lights and UFO appearances in that area that were documented?
Yes, I did come upon other stories like that of UFOs, and there's seems to be many even modern day accounts of people seeing stuff over these forests. But when I think of, this whole Bennington Triangle area, I'm also thinking of it in a prehistoric old world age, which is kind of hard to do, right? But going back to these cairns, which I think are very ancient, how does this relate to the time of the ancient mound builders, which you've discussed before on this show, right? Where you had these ancient earthworks and mounds dotting North America, and even new research and findings seem to be forcing some of the mainstream guys to bend to the fact that they're now admitting that, yes, there were these tall skeletons found in the mounds, and they referred to them as an extinct human group known as the Denisovans, which is a way they get around saying Nephilim, but they're basically describing the same thing. They even call them hybrids who migrated here from Siberia. So if you look into the Denisovan cave in Siberia, they found some crazy stuff in there, and one of them was this giant molar that would have belonged to like a 12-footer. And so, but when you look into the oral traditions of the Native Americans, right, of the ancient past in North America, they basically state that these mound builders, using shamanic rituals, altered states of consciousness, combined with natural earth energies, at these mounds, at the earthworks, that the giant overlords could create portals of communication with non-human intelligences. And so it's crazy when you look into, and I've got so many on my computer, the old newspaper clippings of the late 1800s, early 1900s of giant skeletons, right? And the Smithsonian says that there were none, but even in their own publications of the excavations at these mountains, they were finding all these 7 and 8 footers. So again, I think, how does that relate to this and this prehistoric old world of North America, where, according to the Native Americans, they were tapping into otherworldly realms?
Yeah. I think, I know we've talked about David Paulides a lot on this episode of the Missing 411 stuff, but that was like I said earlier, it was like the shift in my mind. And if you look into that, if you don't know, he has a map, and there's missing people were missing in clusters. It's not like this person's just over here and this person, you know what I mean?
There are some outliers, but yeah, that does
there are
cluster.
hotspots.
Yeah.
And to me, I think at first you think, oh, there's like something there but this whole episode and the one we did with Mike Ricksecker makes me think there's the clusters are related to an energy that's there. And so when people are around that, particularly that spot, they go missing because there's something already there that's.
And I think the proof of that
is
the cairns and the obelisk. I mean,
cairns.
There's something there.
They're asking for the manager. They're asking for the manager. All those rock piles.
So that is the Bennington Triangle story.
Yeah. Sorry, any Karens out there.
No, I mean
Chads and Karens.
I don't mean.
Right?
I mean, I don't
Throw
mean,
the Chad in there.
I don't mean to go back to Mount Shasta, but I can't think about that again. Help think of that again, right? Because in the same way, we've talked about Shasta with you. We talked about J.C. Brown and all that stuff, but that particular missing person's one where the guy walks ahead of his hiking partner on Shasta,
certain elevation,
and then his footprints disappear. Native Americans said the same thing about that place. They don't go. It's a sacred place. You don't go up there. And you go, okay, so they're saying that about Shasta. This could be an outlier. I'm not married to this hypothesis, but it's interesting that these things have a commonality. In they say like this is the burial ground. We don't go up there unless we bury our dead. Why?
Do you think it's related to like energy then? Like it's.
I definitely think that's one of the components. Earth energies. It's probably some ley line going through there. Again, maybe I'm the only one. I just think it's so odd that if you look at other Civil War memorials that are old or Revolutionary War, they're just, this high, not a 300-foot.
There's a bunch around here. I mean, you can trip over them here in Franklin and Brentwood and Nashville. There's no obelisks that I know of.
Do you think it's like a time event? Like if they go through this thing, it's like they're in a different period of time, or do you think they're going from our world somewhere else, or are UFOs attracted to these areas and they're coming there, and that just happens to be a bad place to be on going on a hike one day? Because sometimes it feels like it's a time thing. It's not like everyone says extra dimensional.
Well, like a Stargate, or a portal. Some people would say it's almost like an advanced technological device, right? Where it allows rapid travel between two distant locations in seconds, whether that's people or objects going through them, by means of some interstellar conduit, often called a wormhole. And so, is that something going on in this area that's related to cairns, the earth energies? It's interesting, even in 2015, NASA launched this mission called MMS, which stands for Magnetospheric Multiscale Mission. And when you look into this mission, among other things, one of the things they were looking into was portals in space. And so We even have NASA looking into this stuff.
Well, it makes me think about Ashton Forbes. Like, we talked to Ashton a few times, and we talked to him when we were in Costa Rica with Tim, and he has a very interesting hypothesis about the disappearance of MH370 and the idea that we, as in the U.S. government or factions of the U.S. government, have the technology to control this. This is what the ancients purportedly could do, right? So this isn't this is new for us, but maybe it's not new. You know, we talk about a Stargate, and that a Stargate in and of itself is the ability to control that anomaly, right? It's what Einstein talked about, the Einstein-Rosen bridge. It's this connection between 2 points in space that become, or time, that become connected by a wormhole, right, or a portal. I don't.
But that's
I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's nothing new under the sun, is what the Bible says. So Solomon says nothing is new under the sun. I think that we talk about on the show all the time. The ancients knew way more than we give them credit for. You go all over you've been to Peru. We went to Peru with Tim. You go to Egypt, and you realize that there's things that we can't do, we can't explain, can't recreate, that the ancients did, millennia ago. Yeah. So to think that maybe they had this ability to do this is I don't think is that far fetched.
And I think the data proves it too.
I think that the timing's so weird. This is what has got me and still sticks with me, is that between 3 and 4 o'clock in the fall, it has to be. If this is not like a serial killer that likes to kill at the same time all the time, like Dexter or something like that, then it has to be that at this point in the day, at this point in the year, the conditions are correct based in that time period, in those 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And then you have a specific point.
Yeah.
Minus maybe the last one's an outlier because they find her body, but maybe because this seems to be random and not so random, maybe she could spit back out actually in our time. And I think that's kind of what we talk about missing 411. There's sometimes there's a toddler that ends up 8 miles from where they should have been barefoot, and there's no way they could have traversed the terrain, and it doesn't even make sense. How do they get there, right? So maybe there's sometimes they just sort of end up in another place, and it could be they get dropped off, or maybe it's just a quick connection, and so it's a distance, not a locale, I guess, or a.
But I think that
time.
The data proves that something that isn't, that just you can't on a normal police report say what happened, and I think that I don't know why, but we still as a species have refused to believe that this other stuff is happening, and so it's sort of a crime to families and people who really can look at all the data and say. And I think that I like that about Paulides' work, is it kind of moved my brain out of the Bigfoot space into like a lot broader conversation, a bigger conversation of what's going on here. And I think I like your theory too, Luke. Like, it's a specific time of year, energy's there, the clusters are there. Obviously, this triangle exists because it's all in this one spot. And there's not just that triangle. There's lots of triangles around the world where this kind of thing happens.
Well, I think about the Muta one. Like, there's definitely those events where, like, there's the famous one about the flyer that's flying to Miami, and he arrives like 2 hours beforehand. He ends up in an electrical storm in the Bermuda Triangle, and then he's over Florida into Miami.
His name's Bruce. He's got a story.
Bruce
Gernon.
Yeah,
was he did an epic. It was like a 15-minute flight home, and he's over Miami Airport. Anyway, he there's a couple specials on the History Channel about that. But yeah, like, people can kind of see that these things exist naturally. So the ancients manipulated it, you think?
Well, that sounds kind of like what Jesus did in the boat, right? They're with the disciples, and the boat seems to immediately arrive to shore.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that one before.
Yeah. So is this their version of that?
I never thought about that part.
Yeah, it would have been convenient if Judas went missing, but maybe not convenient.
Well, that's why I asked the time question, because it seems like some of the evidence would suggest that our understanding of how that works is we just kind of look at it like a line, and what's done is done. But it seems to be more of a circle in their understanding of how they use technology. But, you know, when you dig up the sort of ancient stories of like the mound builders and such, are there any other triangles in America like this, or is this specifically like one of the
Alaska
Triangle? Tony Merkel, he dubbed the Tennessee Triangle. So there's apparently some other hot spots.
Tony,
but
we knew they were here. Mound builders were down here,
right?
Luke and I tried to go to one night. That was a fun story,
dude.
Yeah, but
dude, that was yeah. We didn't do it,
but yeah,
it's a very short story. We decided we better not drown or die.
Yeah,
because our kids would be real upset and our significant others. But we tried to go at night and realized that we're like in the middle of nowhere and there are some trailers out here. So if we crossed their property, we could get shot. And the other way is to go across a river that was raging pretty heavily. And so
should have brought a canoe.
We just thought. The dog man wait another night.
Yeah, there was there's a mound here in Tennessee on a peninsula, kind of not too.
That was early on in the show. We decided let's go check this mound out.
Thought maybe there's something weird, some cryptid.
It's like being
a
kid where you're like, we're gonna check out this really creepy thing, and you kind of make it there, and you're like, no, I don't think we're gonna do it. I think we're gonna go back home, turn these bikes around. We're gonna go back.
Yeah, my passion with a lot of this is just that, you know, if people with an open mind look at the archaeological evidence, if they behold the entities and the specimens that we can talk about if we got time, if they read the classified documents, listen to what the eyewitnesses said, read ancient manuscripts, consider the oral traditions of the ancients, even the old world art and maps. I mean, there's so much there. I think people will come to a conclusion that there's so much more than we've been told, right? That's kind of my calling card. There's so much more about history. It seems like there's a forbidden history that the powers that be don't want us looking into. Stranger Things isn't just a Netflix show, right?
Yeah.
I think it was the old world in a sense. And when you kind of put all this out there, the old world was a wild world.
Yeah.
It's rare though, these events. I mean, you know, they don't happen a lot, so it's hard to really kind of get the data together and sort of sound the alarm. But do you think it's just mostly natural, just like a natural phenomenon, or do you think that there's people are being abducted?
There we go. This is going to get deep.
Yes, and
I
think so. Yeah, I think there's people being abducted.
Because I mean, that's the shift. I think once you go there, you don't really come back. I think then you kind of you're sort of forced into like accepting a lot of other stuff. Okay, if people are being abducted, then there's an abduction program. There are entities abducting people. There are UFOs. And I think that's just a big jump from people from like, oh, there's this unknown primate, human monkey thing that's taking people. Now there's this whole other world that exists, portals, technology, metals, sightings.
And they're all taking people.
Yeah. And I think that's so hard for people to jump from that. And the Bigfoot community, I know that they're very black and white a lot of times, and they don't want to get into any of the woo-woo stories of. And so I think for me that was a big shift, and I like. It's hard. It's like the humans need to be sort of hit with the data over and over again. Well, here's the data, here's the story, and then finally, okay, I'm willing to accept that. It doesn't matter if it just takes time. It takes time to open your mind to those possibilities. And I think even for a lot of Christians, that just scares them for some reason. That's a scary concept. We get a lot of hate email from ideas like that. Like, what are you pushing? This is all just a demonic deception. You guys are deceived and you're pushing it. It's like, well, these people go MIA, it's a little bit more than that. So that's kind of just a limited view, but I like the scientific approach.
Well, one of the things that gets me on the abductions is the people that come back with, strange metals inserted in their bodies.
Yeah.
So if it's all just a fairy tale, how do you explain that part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard enough for humans to kind of admit that there's crimes against humanity happening, between us, as let alone these other things. So I think that's a big part of what we do. I think have these conversations, push the conversation forward. Obviously, we're not the smartest, and we don't have all the data, but try to bring those stories to light. Try to have people like you on who have more time to dig into specific aspects of the Blurryverse and help people go, hey, if you're going to go in the woods.
Yeah, when is Stargate Voyager going to the Bennington Triangle?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a Bennington Triangle tour.
Last trip. That'll be the last one.
The last one.
Be a nice fall day between 3 and 4 o'clock. Go for a hike, everyone.
Well, yeah, just don't plan it in the fall or winter, right?
Yeah. This is a spring trip, guys.
Do you think that has anything to do with like the solstices and stuff like that? Because it obviously at certain times of the year, everyone who's come on says you can only see this at this time of year.
I think there could be when it comes to solstices, and Tim knows this. When it comes to Peru, in the ancient world, the solstices are key high days. In fact, one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was the humanoid priests of Peru.
Okay.
Which gets into the solstice days. You want to hit that real quick?
Let's do it.
Oh, wow. We were taking a sharp turn. I like it.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Here we go. All right. Reset your minds, people. We're going
I'm sure most people here have seen pictures of the elongated skulls in Peru. We've covered them at length here on this show.
Yeah.
They were first began to be discovered in the 1920s by a Peruvian archaeologist, and most of them range between 1,000 and 3,000 years old. And yes, there are many cradle headboarded skulls. Those were the general population trying to look like their hybrid warlords or overlords who had the real elongated skulls, right? Those are the ones with the big eye sockets, larger jaws, missing sagittal sutures, and on average, probably they have 25% more cranial mass. Oh, look at this. Dan's on it.
And the foramen magnum is in the wrong, is moved.
So yes, look at this photo here. Yes, exactly. The foramen magnum. The one on the left is a natural elongated skull, and the one on the right, I think, is an Inca with a cradle headboarded skull trying to look like the guy on the left. And so
it's gnarly.
You got these two different types of skulls, and the crazy thing is, go to photo 2 or 3, I think it is. We've got some other mummies. So this was discovered several years ago, and this is a not just elongated skull, but a mummy head. Go to the next couple photos. Look at that one, how massive this is. And this thing was dated at 800 BC. That's when it lived. But the point is, it was a newborn when it died. It was born with an elongated skull. So that kind of blows out the skeptics who say these were just cradle headboarded, right? Go to photos, I think it's 10. There's some other ones you can see. Strange. This is Waikiki, probably one of the most famous humanoids you've seen in Peru, or photos of. That thing's got a huge skull. Go back to the Waikiki, that one. It's cut off on the TV, but it's got this hole in its head. Remember that. Okay, so the point is, now go to photo 11. Okay, so here's me standing in front of a site you guys went to with Tim, I think.
Yeah.
Napa Iglesia. This is one of the most incredible megalithic sites in Peru, in this cave high in the Andes.
There's no rope when we were there. We set up in there. And we came back. We didn't go anywhere. We made it.
So this is completely megalithic, precision cut. And you see these precision cuts like this in many places in the Cusco area, right? I 100% believe these predate the Inca. This is megalithic. Indigenous will say this was the work of the Hanan Pacha, which is a Quechuan word, I believe, that says this was basically the lost megalithic engineers of Peru who had lost technology, okay? So the point is, the Inca's most prized possessions, and you can leave that photo here, were the bodies and the elongated skulls of these humanoid entities. And they would venerate them. In fact, the Inca Civil War, also known as the War of the Two Brothers, which happened in the 1530s, it was basically over which brother got to keep the best elongated skulled humanoids. So the Inca venerated or worshipped these malkis, they called them, which I think translates as mummy. But the point is, these precision megalithic huacas, that's what the Inca called them, if I'm pronouncing that right, Tim, on the solstices, June 21st summer solstice and the December 21st solstice. Now, this is coming straight from my guide, Rumi, who I think is one of the top ancient wisdom keepers in Peru. So he was telling me how on these solstices is when the portals would open, and they were opened by the Orion Belt. And the Inca knew the stargates opened up, and they'd bring the malkis out and place them right inside that specific portal. And what's crazy is, according to the Inca traditions, the dead mummy would literally become animated, and it would become animated in a zombie-like state to where the ancient spirits would speak through it as an oracle to the Inca. And there's even some Spanish chronicles that talk about this, whether the Spanish chroniclers witnessed it or just heard about it, but they've talked about this in some spots. So that's crazy about the solstices, but it gets crazier. So according to oral traditions, the most special humanoids, hybrids, again, they were used as oracles in a lot of ways. They would have gold artifacts surgically inserted into the top of their heads, their elongated skulls, while they were still fully alive, to help them better connect with the gods. And so I think that's why Waiki and a lot of those mummies you see have the big hole in the head. Somebody ripped out that gold artifact and probably sold it. But it gets even crazier. So according to oral traditions, so we know that these hybrid humanoids in the Procus area lived again as far back as maybe 3,000 years ago. It might have been even further. But according to my guide Rumi, there was a contingent, a remnant of them still alive during the time of the Inca. They were still alive in the 1400s and 1500s. And so these ones that were alive were considered the highest priest class of the Inca. They were considered the scientists, the demigods, really. And I think we got a photo that proves this. Go to the next photo. So when you come out of this cave where that megalithic structure is, and if you look to your left, you'll see this next picture, if we got it. And you can see this clearly is not megalithic. This is classic Inca construction, small rough stones, clay mortar. But what do you notice about the entrance?
Little.
It's made for like a 3 or 4 foot entity. And Richard here was on our tour with us. Amazing guy. He was like 6'1", big guy. I said, go get next to that so I can get the scale of this. I should have had him stand. But he could barely fit through that crouching down. So I asked our guide about this. What is with this little structure? And what he told me was this was the dwelling of the living Malkis. They were the caretakers of this most sacred site to the Inca. And this is likely where they lived. And on the solstices where, they would meet the Inca in the cave and lead them as the high priests in their occult worship. So what do you think about that when it comes to the solstices?
Yeah, what do you think about that, Nathan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, some of them are not so big, so you kind of wonder.
It's your wheelhouse.
It's like little Yodas running around, giving people the instructions, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to consider that, I feel like this is kind of the forbidden history I talk about that nobody ever learned about in school. that you never read about in the so-called history books, that up until 500 years ago, there was hybrid humanoids on planet Earth in Peru living amongst the Inca.
Well, that's the bizarre thing is like, I think when you get into the Nephilim space, you just think everything was massive and huge. But there's a bunch of different types of hybrid creatures, big, small, all in between. And it's easy to kind of obsess about the big ones, right? Because that's just...
and the Inca talk all over about giants, too.
He likes the little ones.
Yeah.
Big little people. You're a big little people guy.
Well, you like the little ones with the red hair.
Well, yeah.
Because all the Malkis had dark
Somebody's
red hair.
gotta like them.
They had red hair or dark hair?
Dark red hair.
Dark red. Hey, pal.
Well, I mean, if they... I think obviously
the Giants had red hair.
Their place in
little people had red hair. This makes a lot of sense, dude.
And the story would be their like maybe their insane intelligence, right? That's how they sort of survived. Obviously, little creatures are going to get. What are they going to do to survive? They have to have some value, or they get taken out, right?
They could wrestle.
Right. Either they hide, or they're really smart. That's your options, right? Anyway, we were there.
We've been there, actually.
We were in that.
It's cool to see these places and been like, I've been there.
Yeah, I got a photo of you and Tim sitting there.
Yeah, we were right on the side. We were both in the
Smelled
portal.
a little bad though.
It wasn't me.
Who knows? Okay, so like, so to get there, you have to hike up the side of you have to park in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of nowhere. You hike up the side of the mountain, and to get into this cave, you're like, why is this here? So there's some energy or some reason here. It doesn't make any sense where it was. It's just a stop along. It's like a rest stop in America, and you just up at that mountain. There's this megalithic, cave thing. So that was what I was thinking. Is like there's got to be something else going on here for this to be a specific the location of this thing, and why would they take the time to do that? So maybe there's could be some doorway, some energy.
Don't
you
be
tell
up
us,
there in the
you've told
portal.
the story too about being there, and then something coming out of it, according to because they were doing some ceremony there when you were there.
Oh, yeah, that was a crazy experience.
Yeah.
I could paraphrase super fast.
Yeah, you guys remember the story with Derek? Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Well, you can tell us again because I like it.
Well, no, just we were up there. It was the first time I'd ever been to Peru and didn't really know what I was getting into. The guide I was with had basically an Inca shaman as his sidekick who was actually inviting the group to join him in welcoming the spirits. And so I'm just sitting back watching this. And the guy was beating on a drum, and he had explained to us that this was one of the most holy, sacred places to the Inca, that last slide with the portal. And so it felt real peaceful for a few minutes, right? Until we heard a blood-curdling scream. And, shocked, you look up, and this guy is, shaking and convulsing and freaked out of his mind. And so we go to help him, and when he settles down, he tells us that he was doing what the shaman said. He was welcoming the spirits, and a puma came through the portal and entered him. And if you know the ancient, pieces of Peru, the puma is a very important animal.
Yeah,
so
they say the stones in Cusco downtown.
Yeah, no mistake that it was a puma, right?
Yeah. It's interesting.
The puma symbolizes the mid-level of consciousness, and they've embedded it everywhere.
Man, is that the same or different than a panther? There's a lot of black panthers down in Louisiana. We learned that recently.
Yeah, Uncle Si told us some stories about that. But give it up.
The same story a lot.
Give it up, everyone, for Derek Olson.
Yeah, get up for Derek Olson.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Derek, remind our listeners at home and here where they can follow you and harass you, so they don't harass us as much.
This has been fun. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Man, it's so great to see you and be in this amazing studio, and hopefully the new pieces add to the collection. But yeah, anybody can follow me on Stargate Voyager. That's my handle. Used to be Megalithic Marvels. Now it's Stargate Voyager. I'm on YouTube and Spotify and StargateVoyager.com. And I go on some tours. So if you ever want to join me on one of those, it's just StargateVoyager.com/tours.
All right, Derek. Thanks, man. Thanks for being there from the beginning and talking about the pyramids with Dr. Judd and
Yeah.
Shasta and all the other things we've talked about. over the
J.C.
years.
Brown, baby.
And being at BlurryCon 1, and maybe we got some other things planned. But
The legend of J.C.
We're going to
Brown.
open it up for like a quick Q&A for like 15 minutes if you guys want to grab a mic and do a little after show here.
You can ask Derek. You can ask us anything.
Yeah. Questions about the wild man, whatever you got, we're ready. Is this mic hot right here? Okay. You have to walk up to it.
Yeah, you got to, yeah.
Can't be
All right.
shy. If you're shy, it doesn't work. But thanks, Derek. Thanks, man.
Any connection with witchcraft in Vermont related to that Bennington Triangle or Freemasons? Because there's a obelisk there. So I didn't know if it reminds me of some of the things with Dr. Laura Sanger's book talking about ancient sites, ancient Nephilim, ancient Indian Nephilim, where they were maybe doing human sacrifice. I just wonder if there's any possible hints in history or oral traditions related to that triangle site.
Yeah, great question. There's definitely witchcraft in the area, I can tell you that. And I haven't officially seen that there's Freemasons, but I'm sure there are. But I've found in my time in this space of ancient history, I found that that witchcraft and stuff, those kind of people are usually drawn by these earth energies. And so New England is known for, witchcraft, and there's a lot of that in Vermont. But I definitely think that plays a part, or at least they're drawn by the energies and they're doing their thing there.
It's like Sedona. It sounds like, if you've ever been to Sedona, you know that. Like there's every corner is like a fortune teller and a crystal shop, and it's because that is another place that supposedly has these energies, these vortexes of energy. It tracks those people. So I think it's a fair hypothesis, Brad. I like it.
I was just curious about the archaeoastronomy also that might exist in that location from those cairns, not Karens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Karens.
Thanks.
Those Karens.
Man, the studio looks awesome. Thanks so much for having us here.
Thanks for
Super
coming.
fun. And Derek, thanks for your expertise. I think it's probably because I follow you guys on Instagram and Twitter and all, so I started getting these weird things on my feed. And if Tim wants to jump in, that'd be great. But Tartarian Empire, talking about megalithic structures, super complex architecture based on the probably doctored photos. I have no idea. But you have thoughts on that?
Do you have any thoughts on that, Derek?
I did an episode on this topic recently with a guest, and it's one of those topics where I was originally kind of skeptical, but man, the more of these photos you see that aren't the fake ones, boy, they're definitely, it's crazy, all the buried cities. And when you see photos of Chicago in the 1800s, it's like how have we gone backwards? Right? These massive superstructures that are so elaborate. But you mentioned Tim. If Tim wants to jump in on that question. Tartaria. All right.
Yeah. I think it's a clever psyop.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I think. The orphan train stuff and all that. I
think there's a lot of things in this space that are like designed to get people off like important rabbit holes, but some of that stuff is just kind of bizarre.
I do think like there's some points though. Like I think there's a definite we've lost craftsmanship abilities even since those times. We know this. Like there's simple things like you can go into Victorian era houses and find woodworking that we can't recreate because those craftsmen don't do it anymore. They don't exist. Actually, there are no people who know how to do it anymore. So the idea that there is, architecture and things that existed that has been law, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I think about that.
Sometimes it feels like, they there's that's one conversation, but then it goes and it morphs into this whole other thing, gets followers, picks up steam. Next thing you know, they're,
it's like the melting thing. Which I don't buy any of that, but that's a whole other conversation.
It's hard to know. Like, I mean, for us, I think we stay in certain lanes, and some of those feel there's like a weird energy behind some of these, where people are pot committed to it. It's not like I'm researching, I'm up and I'm open and I change my mind and go back and forth. Since starting to pick a topic like Sasquatch, it's always an evolving conversation. But some of these conversations, like once people get into it, they never come back and they never change their mind. It's like a religion. It's like a dogma. You have to believe this thing. It's like, okay, that's when I start to go, there's something else going on with this rabbit hole particularly. And
the Chicago part is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting.
That's weird.
But then it's like the whole world had this, I don't know, and it just gets kind of wild. But it's not just that. There's a lot of
like birds are fake. That one's real. That's a real one.
Birds are fake. That one's real.
Thanks, guys, for this opportunity to be here. And
happy anniversary.
Do this. Oh, thank you.
25 years, guys. Give it up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun event. So thank you for hosting this and all the other interesting things you do. We'll just keep praying for you guys in your blurry adventure. But my question is for Derek, and it is, what was your gateway into the megalithic world?
Good question.
Yeah. Love that question. I always grew up fascinated by history. Seriously, as a kid, I would always ask my mom, who were these Nephilim? The Genesis 6:4 was always big in my mind. And I never really got answers, but it was just I always knew there was more to this. And then, of course, the story of Goliath was my favorite Bible story, David and Goliath. So I was always into history, always, just amazed by the pyramids. And then as the story goes, I think it wasn't until like 2012, fast forward all those years, I was on my day off and I was doing an image search of ancient structures. And it was the first time I saw a megalithic wall in Peru. And I literally did a double take, like, what is that? And I couldn't believe that was my first sight. How have I never seen this before? This puffy megalithic wall.
Yeah.
So again, went down the rabbit hole and found somebody that was saying this is actually pre-Inca. There's a hidden history.
Yeah.
And I was like, sold. And so a couple years later, I found myself in Peru looking at these walls, hence the story I shared, and seeing the elongated skulls. And then I thought, okay, now we do have proof of, these possible descendants of the Nephilim on the earth that we can look at, because I just knew there's no way this is just a cradle headboarded human. So I basically came back from Peru with all these photos and videos, and I just started some accounts, Megalithic Marvels started posting, and I just saw there was an appetite for it, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
Just Googling pictures of ancient stuff, as one does.
2012, too.
I was looking at fantasy football, and it's just, attaboy.
Should have been buying Bitcoin in 2000.
No, we all should have been. Yeah, it'd be a whole different conversation here. We'd be on a yacht, being like, "Isn't this cool?"
Did you paint this, Derek? Is that what you do in the spare time? You paint? You're a painter?
Yeah, hand painted.
The Microsoft Paint, I think.
Not really.
The mic's a little. You gotta.
There you go.
Gotta lower it here. Thanks for having us, guys. I just wanted to hear about your spiritual journey, because I discovered you as a baby Christian 3 years ago and have a similar journey to you guys. Started in the Sacramento area, migrated out here, COVID time, and from the New Age, and just like Jesus, like, save me, thank you, Lord. And you guys have been such a big part of my journey, and just because I was always seeking the spiritual through psychedelics or yoga or whatever it was, and just you brought the Bible to life for me, and that it is such a spiritual book, and I thank you for that. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about how this journey has been for you guys and your spiritual walk, and it's been so important to me. So I thank you, and I just want to hear more about that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's so encouraging and crazy. It's amazing. Nate?
I was telling a friend the other day, I think oftentimes it felt like when you grew up and you like had your normal life over here, just kind of trying to exist, and you know, you grew up in the church, there's a lot of moral teachings, and then the Bible's kind of over here, and you hear stories, you see things, but they're just very disconnected from your real life. You know, you go for a couple hours. But for me, it was different because I went to Christian school, so I felt like Saturday was my only day off. But I think doing this podcast sort of put these, like, moved these things closer. And I think when I was looking the hardest was like 2019. When Heiser is kind of getting into Mike Heiser stuff, it was like, I don't know, it just like overnight felt like this things just got shoved together, and it was like, okay, this whole thing is one big story, and the whole thing's weird. Everything, just our existence, and it wasn't this chasm between life as we know it in the modern era and our faith. And so I was like, this podcast has to happen, because if this is what it's doing to me, I know it'll do it for other people who've grew up and were basically born into the church, but still felt like, I don't get it, or they come up with these progressive modern explanations of an ancient story to sort of, okay, maybe this will help. And I think that's even further from the truth. So, over the last 4 or 5 years, there's some things that are more interesting than others, but it's come together, and I think it's come together for a lot of people. And you get more questions a lot with that, but I think guys like Mike Heiser really helped start that journey for me, and I'm thankful for him and thankful for just what this podcast has become.
Yeah, I was talking earlier with some folks out there about like some of my journey. I mean, in some ways, it's a lot. It's the same in some ways. I mean, grew up in the church, and went to church with my family, and had my faith. Kind of rediscovered my faith in senior year of high school. I was a YWAMer after college, which is the opposite way most people do it. But I had some crazy experiences there where I saw God do some amazing things. I saw people get healed. I saw a paralytic get healed. I saw demons get cast out. I saw people I saw miracles, and it really changed my life at that point at 22, turning 23, as far as the way I understood things and saw God move. I knew God was real. And it's funny how you have these sort of mountaintop experiences, and then it's time, and I think also, like, in some ways the enemy has his way of eroding these things, like, oh, that didn't really happen that way. That didn't really happen. Did that really happen that way? That is not how it really happened. Did it really even happen? And I don't know. I think the timing of the podcast for me was really good. I think like a lot of folks, like 2020 was a huge wake up call. All of a sudden it was like you kind of had this bubble burst of like the things you believed, like about America and about your governance and about the reality of reality, and it was about the same time that we have sort of told this same story ad nauseum about Nate and I tweeting about Bigfoot and starting this podcast. But the journey in the podcast is fascinating for me because I had never been exposed to a lot of this stuff. I've grown up in the church and also charismatically been involved in all the stuff with YWAM and everything. Like, I had that experience. I knew that I've seen the power of God move, seen God do incredible things. But like, I had never been exposed to, like, I had never even really thought about Genesis 6. Didn't even think about it till we had the podcast. And I thought a lot about Bigfoot and liked paranormal. I had this very much more than a passing interest in mysteries and things unknown. But, I didn't even know who Mike Heiser was when we went to interview him. And that's crazy now to think about, like, just Mike's work, and then talking to everybody from Derek about ancient things to Tim and his approach to Genesis 6, and these were all new for me. So as we're going through it, I'm like, wow, I got something to think about. And I remember when Nate said the first time we're gonna talk about aliens, I was like, oh boy, here, I don't really want to do that. Here goes the entire show's going out the window now. That's my thoughts, really. And he's like, no, we need to do it. And I'm like, okay, but no one's gonna take us seriously, and it's kind of been a long way since that. So it's fun. I always say this. I think it's the coolest thing about this podcast is that if you're if you join us from the beginning, you sit with us through it all. Like we're consuming this information for the first time, and when you are, maybe it's a time thing. Like it's just fun to talk about in this context. Like we might be here, and people might be doing it now for the first time, listening to it, but we're on the same journey at that point in time, and it's been infinitely. There's so many stories of just. I think God's been so gracious to us. I'm eternally grateful for this, to be sit here and doing this. Like I think this is not what I imagined at all about my life or for my life. Really ever, dude, never. So, but I'm grateful. This scratches an itch that I think it's funny. Like when I sit with my buddies and Bible study, I have a Bible study on Fridays with a bunch of guys, or just hanging with guys smoking a cigar, drinking a bourbon. Like these topics come up, and not just because I do Blurry Creatures, it's because this has now become part of the discourse. Like, what do we think about what's happening in the Middle East? What do we think about, UAP congressional hearings? What do you think about this latest whistleblower? This is like weird. This is weird. Like, what do we think about all this? And
to find out that they're like congressmen are listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
And things like that, and some of these big Christian people as well as listening to the podcast, and
congressmen's like kids. They're saying, should talk to Timothy Alberino about aliens.
I think it's just cool. It's like there is nothing really keeping Blurry Creatures from going in all sorts of different directions in the world. It's not you and I. It's just this conversation and things people say it's blurry, and that is like a thing now.
But I also think it's cool. Like, it's weirdly
really
like a ministry. Like I think the weirdest, coolest thing about this and sitting here with you guys is that, like, I think Nate and I's heart in all of this is that if people pick up the podcast or even an episode, that they can strangely encounter the gospel in the midst of all this, because we do believe that the Bible is the arbiter of truth. It's the foundation of truth, and all things can be sifted and sieved through that filter.
Yeah.
And it's cool, man.
And it's you guys.
Yeah, it is. It's such a cool community. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for what it's done for my life and my walk. Even though I feel like, and sometimes we joke about this, but it's true. Like you also get a lot of you get a lot of pushback. The Kingdom of Darkness is fully aware, I think, of the things that are happening in this space, and they don't like it, which just gives me more credence to continue, because I think it matters, and it'll matter as long as God wants it to matter, and that's I'm good with that. Like, if it's next week, it's fine. I think this has been an amazing journey. If it's 5 years from now, then that's incredible. But I think Nate and I at our heart just want God to do what He wants to do with this and this vehicle, as long as He wants to do it, and I know our heart is to stay out of the way. Like the best we can from what He wants to do. So I don't.
Yeah. Remember the early days of Blurry editing alone in the basement, and here we are back in the basement. It was sort of all started with the basement, ends in the basement. I think that it's just like a humble roots of what this thing was. It was never intended to be anything more than a conversation, learning, and it's cool you guys all came along with us. And thank you for coming tonight. Give it up one more time for Derek. And
hey, can I say one quick thing about you guys?
Yeah.
If I could just brag on you guys. So I, deal with a lot of people in this space, content creators and podcasters, and I don't think there's two more humble guys I've met and genuine dudes than you guys. That despite the success and the accolades have just stayed the same humble guys. And, every once in a while I get a random call from Nate, and he's painting or doing something with a squirrel. And he's like, how you doing?
Squirrel walnuts, yeah.
And so anyway, I just want to say thanks and just...
I guess I should call you more, I guess. Okay, I get the message.
No. I've gotten calls from Luke too. But anyway, thanks for being the real you.
Thanks, man. It's all you can do, I think. Well, we have time for a few more pictures up here if you can get a photo, and then it's raining like crazy out there. But thanks again for making this first live show. We're figuring this out.
Thanks for being the guinea pigs for the first time, because this is like...
There is some food if you're hungry.
Please take some food.
Grab some food. And thank you guys so much. Grab a poster. Jenny's got some stuff if you haven't picked up anything on the way out. Want to get a hat or something, but roll that time cop.
I was going to do it. We haven't done that in ages.
Yeah.
Roll that time
Thank
cop,
you, guys.
baby. Roll it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Maybe we'll see you in Israel. Maybe we'll see you at the BlurryCon 3. We don't know.
BlurryCon
But drive
3.
safe.
Oh,
Get home
man,
safe.
yeah.
Thank you guys so much.